Alright, let's get in and add the body. The body for me is the next most important thing to add, just because there's so much about the posture I don't know and a whole bunch of other aspects to this character. And it might seem really daunting to now have to go in and suddenly add this entire rest of the figure and figure out all of whatever he's doing. But I'm going to walk you through this real time, step by step, so don't sweat it. We're going to be able to handle this really easily. And to do it, we're going to be using DynaMesh again, only this time we're going to be introduced to another really cool part of DynaMesh, the insert brushes. So what I'm going to do is just append another sphere 3D. Comes in here at the top. I'm going to make sure I select that sphere, and I'm going to make sure I turn DynaMesh on. So DynaMesh in the Geometry tab, turn Polyframe on, and you can see that's adjusted my polyframe. Okay, but now I need to go in and learn a little bit more about this interface, because I don't want to just go in and start to work on this without any foundation or any guide to really help me through the process. So to help me through the process, in the Floor tab here, I'm going to press Z as in zebra. It's right next to the Y, and it's very easy to miss it, because we're not used to looking for buttons within buttons. So there's this little Y in the Floor button. Right next to that is Z. We're going to turn Z on, and you can leave Y on as well, or you can turn it off. In my case, I'm probably, let's turn that off. Get full exposure. So there we go. Y is off, Z is on, and there's the floor. Let's turn perspective off for this, because now what we're going to do is use this floor as a guide. Except for we've got one problem. The floor isn't really set up with measurement units for us. So I'm going to work with about I'm probably going to work with a 7-head zombie. So we're going to try to make that work. 7 heads, 8 head might, who needs a heroic zombie, right? So anyways, we're going to try to make 7 heads work, but we have to adjust the grid behind here to make that happen. And the way we do that is up here in the draw palette. So let's just drag the draw palette to the tray. I'm going to take grid size, and I'm going to increase it. Let's just set it to 2. Pull out. And what I really need, let's say, well, what, has that become 1? That might have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Might work. Might work. Let's do a quick test. Yeah, we're within range. I don't want to set it to 3, because the number starts to change, and I want to keep it a multiple of 2 or something like that. Alright, so 2 is going to work for me. So I'm going to take the body itself, what's supposed to be the body, and now we need to pull this downwards. So I'm introducing you to the features inside of ZBrush in their context as you would be introduced to them, as you would need them. So now we have to move this part downwards so that basically it's starting to represent the rib cage. That's the ideal situation, because now what I would like to do is say chart out where the rib cage is going to be. So we're going to have a little neck. Rib cage is going to start, and the rib cage is going to be say 1.5 heads. So we're going to be looking at something like that. The hip bones are going to come in. Down from there we're going to get the legs, and then we're going to be moving from there. Okay, I'm a little bit off in terms of this sketch because it started with an 8 head, but this is going to be the general process that I want to try to move towards. Now, I've got to move that sphere down here. How do I do that? That's where transpose comes in handy. So we go up to move, scale or rotate. We particularly want move. And if you zoom in, you're going to see we get this little action line, which is really important. So we get this thing that has 3 dots with a red dot in the center, and then a line that connects all of it. Now the outer orange dots, these move the action line around and help you position things. So therefore positioning. The inner red dots, those are for actual transformations. So they will actually transform the model around, depending on which one you selected and whether you're in move, scale, or rotate. So what I'm going to do is click on the model and drag straight up, okay, and press shift while I do that, so I get a straight line. And make sure symmetry is on, perspective is off, and then I'm going to select the center dot of the action line and pull downwards. Center dot, pull downwards till I get that roughly in the rib cage's position. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit up towards the top, and then I'm going to redraw the action line. And now, instead of selecting the center, instead of doing that, I'm going to select the end and drag up. And what that's going to do is take what's a round sphere right now and make that more of an oval on both sides, with the other round dot, the other end of that action line, serving as the fulcrum. Alright, so click and drag up. So I'm clicking inside and dragging up, making it an oval. But it's important to know that if you're working on the top, the bottom becomes the fulcrum. Let me illustrate that. I'm going to click the lines and move this upwards. Then I'm going to click inside, and notice that the fulcrum now is right here. So the fulcrum is changed. There we go. And we want 1.5 heads for the ribcage, basically. So I'm going to use these measurements. I'm going to assume this is close to 1 head, so 1.5, which means that we end up chopping this off a little bit, and then we get the ribcage there. Okay, so that's just the measurements I'm working with. Draw. I'm going to switch to the move brush and just cap off that bottom. There we go. Make sure that you've got at least 1 head in terms of its width. Okay, so 1 head. Like that. Or really 1.25. Somewhere between 1 and 1.25. We don't want a robust zombie in this case, at least I don't. And then the next thing I gotta do for a rib cage, start to establish a little bit more of that shape. So I'm going to tilt it backwards in space. So they always say that the rib cage goes backwards in space, the hip tilts forwards in space, and then you get the humerus coming down in a nice curve. Not the humerus, the femur coming down in a nice curve. Okay, the arms will come from behind. Let's do them in red. And move in. Then a little nice S shape. So all I've got to do is select the top of this and move it back. And that's pretty straightforward. Get a little slope. Yeah. Pull up. And then pull down to flatten. Okay, something like that. You can also turn the X grid on. So I'm in floor and I click X, and so this basically gives me the X and the Z, so the side and the front. And that's kind of cool because I can be checking my measurements here as well, and getting a sense of things. So I'd say that's a fairly decent shape for the rib cage. We're going to be doing a lot of work, so I don't want it to be perfect. Alright, I spent a lot of time on that rib cage. I suggest you do. But now we're in DynaMesh and we're ready for the next phase. So what I'm going to do is go into the Insert Sphere brush, and I'm going to add my first part. But in this case, I'm not adding it as a subtool. I'm adding it to my model. Or I'm adding it to this subtool as a separate piece. They're completely separate, for now that is. And so this is like adding chunks of clay. It's only possible in DynaMesh. And you really want to know how to use Move before you get here, because what I'm going to do now is drag out an action line, look at it from a side view, select that center dot, and I'm going to position this in here to be a stomach. You could position it in to be the hips, actually. Why don't we do that so that we have some sense of clarity of where we're going here. Make sure you press Shift when you move this around, and let's revisit our proportions for a moment. We're going to reset this a little bit. It might be a touch confusing what I'm doing, but I just want to establish my 7.5 head proportions. Let's go 7.5 head. So we've got our head here. Okay, the second line is a little bit above the nipple line. Okay, and then the pelvic area, the pubic symphysis is going to be roughly at that halfway point. So let's just put it about here. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 3.5. In fact, let's undo that. So that's roughly at 3.5 to 3 3/4 heads is where you're going to get that. And then the great trochanter coming out on both sides. And then the knee. So the femur and the knee in the center. And then the tibia and the leg. Tibia and foot, sorry. So that's roughly the direction that we're going to be moving. That's the kind of zombie I wanna work with, something around those proportions. So in that sense, the torso is too low, right? So I'm gonna move him up to fit, and I'm just gonna keep this drawing in my mind. So I'm drawing on the screen, and I'm using my screen capture program to do that. So you might want to just get a copy, start drawing on the screen yourself, or there are other ways that you can draw on the screen. But sometimes I'll just grab the screen capturing, this is Camtasia, and I'll just start recording and drawing right on the screen because it makes things easier.